Nomadic empires were some of the most fascinating entities in human history. Originating from the steppes of Central Asia, most lived in isolation, unbothered by neighboring empires who saw their lands as worthless. This isolation allowed many nomadic tribes to specialize increasingly in nomadic life and warfare, competing with other tribes in a continuous struggle that, in a survival of the fittest way, resulted in ever-proficient warrior tribes. And once every few centuries they ventured forth from their steppes to overrun and conquer settled societies that were ill-prepared to face them. However, as efficient and near unbeatable as these nomadic peoples were in their conquests, a curious thing about them was that once they settled in the lands they had conquered, the nomads turned into what they had conquered. The Magyar tribes conquered Pannonia and turned into the Hungarian kingdom. The Slavic tribes conquered Eastern Europe and turned into the Slavic kingdoms. The Seljuk Turks conquered Iran and became the new Iranian Empire. The Ottoman Turks conquered Anatolia and became the new Romans. The Chagatai Turks conquered India and became the Indians. The Mongols conquered Iran and became the new Iranian Empire. And when the Mongols conquered China, they became the new Chinese Empire. There is, however, one big exception in this series of historic conquests by nomadic peoples and their consequent social restructuring: Russia. Medieval Russia was not that much different from many other medieval European states at the time, a collection of small duchies, cities and dukedoms with no centralized overarching authority. The most prominent among these were the Kievan Rus and the Novgorod Republic. The Kievan Rus was a princely state with deep cultural and commercial ties into Europe, mainly through the Byzantines. The Novgorod Republic was a city-state and an important part of the Hanseatic League of cities that stretched across the Baltic and North Sea. Then came the Mongols. There's a tendency amongst modern historians to paint the Mongol Empire in a positive light as an institution of trade and tolerance, which, though, is very oversimplified and overlooks the fact that the Mongol Empire was an extractive institution. The Mongols were a tribal people who had no state or legal structures that they transferred over to the people they conquered. Their relation with those they conquered was purely predatory. They wanted to extract wealth and resources from them, and those who refused paid dearly. The Kievan Rus was one of these places that resisted. Kiev was burnt to the ground and the surrounding lands pillaged, with much of the population slaughtered. Medieval accounts tell us of fields filled with human remains for decades after the siege. With the burning of Kiev, a substantial political and cultural transformation of what we now know as Russia began. The Kievan Rus, with its deep cultural and economic ties to the Byzantians, had been the cultural motherland and birthplace of Russia, the place where Russia as a European cultural entity had been created. All that was left of it now was ash. The cultural and economic ties with the Byzantians were now broken. This resulted in a geopolitical shift of Russia, culturally and politically, in power to the northeast. The Mongols enforced their economic order upon
Just
the
to let you know that the winter in Stockholm will be sunny, maybe with a chance of a God Games, which means Nina
Kopisen
will go to the beach with the doc. Sending best wishes.
I feel like you're not sending your best wishes. I feel like you're rubbing it in.
Russian principality states, and the center of Russian political and economic power consequently shifted to the landlocked plains of Smolensk, Rostov and Chernikov. These places and the princes who ruled them had been largely ignored backwaters before the Mongols. Now they stood at the center of Russia. Throughout the rest of Europe, the institution of feudalism had during this time started to be increasingly challenged. New political and commercial institutions evolved in European trade cities, from Antwerp to Hamburg to Königsberg, Warsaw, Paris, Lisbon, London and Venice. Merchants, barons and artisan guilds rewrote the feudal social contract. Additionally, the Black Plague shook up the economic framework of Europe dramatically. With a third of Europe's population killed, there were no longer enough peasants to work the lands for lords. Landlords consequently started competing for the remaining peasants, but
it's not very interesting, man. It's not very interesting. It's fucking sleep.